Who did you raise your hand to? One evening I walked my girlfriend home. Saying goodbye to her, I went to my house. The time was late, and I decided to cut through the yards. I pass through one of the yards and see a guy of about 25. Next to him is a homeless-looking granny, and it is clear that they are swearing seriously. The guy with his fists is climbing on her. It should be noted that the guy is clearly not poor, decently dressed, in the hands of a mobile phone. As I understand it, they swear because the granny, passing by his car with a cart on wheels, apparently scratched the paint. At first, I even went up to them. The old woman felt sorry, but then I decided not to interfere in my own business and quickly began to bypass them. Then I heard the sound of a blow, turned my head and saw how the grandmother fell. The guy, then, still moved her. I stopped, thinking about how I should act in such a situation. But then I see, the grandmother herself rises to her feet. But strangely somehow and for a long time rises. When they quarreled, she barely reached his chest, and then I look, she towered over him by about 2 heads. I took a closer look and see, it is not worth it, but it seems to be hovering a meter above the ground. My jaw dropped. I closed my eyes and opened them sharply. Nothing had changed. The god's dandelion still hovered above the ground. I decided to get out of there as soon as possible. As I took a step, I heard a thunderous low voice. You on whom hand raised, ugly. I turned my head around, hoping to find the source of that voice. But there was not a soul around. I had to admit, this voice belongs to the old woman. Feeling a mixture of amazement and horror, I hurriedly began to retreat to the corner of the building in order to dive behind it. The air around me suddenly became viscous, as if I were floundering in a pool of condensed milk. I couldn't coordinate my arms and legs, but I couldn't fall either. Frozen in an unnatural pose, I nevertheless twisted my neck and looked around. The guy, who had just seemed like such a cool navel of the earth, was lying on the ground and, wriggling like a snake, was trying to crawl away from the old woman hanging over him. From the guy's mouth came sounds similar to the meowing of a kitten and the croaking of frogs. And the old woman, stretching out her hands to the guy, just laughed in a loud bass at the guy's attempts to crawl away. She seemed to simply enjoy his helplessness. Then I noticed that the old woman's arms began to lengthen. The guy probably noticed it too, and squealed like a pig. And the hands kept growing and growing. It seemed to me that she wanted to grab the guy by the throat. Then she abruptly turned her head in my direction, and our eyes met. I did not see her eyes as such. Instead of them there were black holes. The last thing I remember is that, huddling into a ball, bringing my knees to my chin, I began to cross myself and, not recognizing my own voice, began to shout out fragments of some prayers. And I also remember the rattle, the groans of the guy, this vile voice shouting something. In the morning the police found me. They took me to my place, interrogated me for a long time, trying to find out what I saw, whether I knew Yuri Nikolaevich. I answered all the questions that I do not remember anything. He said that he was drunk and just fell asleep in the yard, although I didn't drink a single gram of alcohol that day. But I couldn't even talk about what happened. And not because I was afraid that they would not believe me and put me in a psychiatric hospital, but because I knew that this old woman saw me and remembered me well. In the end, they let me go. And the cause of the guy's death, as I later learned from acquaintances in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, was recognized as a heart attack.